Well, hello, folks, and welcome to the Dieter Melhorn Fishing Podcast. I hope you're having a good day, whatever day it is that you happen to be listening to the show. Today, we're going to talk about spinning reels. I've had a bunch of messages from people recently. For some reason, it's like sometimes this stuff comes in spurts where people are looking at older videos or perhaps looking at Christmas gifts or looking at birthday gifts and looking at buying some stuff for the fishing season. And they go, man, what about a spinning reel? And anyway, it comes in these little groups of stuff. Sometimes it's about hooks, sometimes it's about rods. I've seen a lot of stuff about spinning reels lately, so I'm going to talk about them for a minute here and kind of go over some of the do's and don'ts, good points, bad points, when they're good, when they're bad, all that kind of stuff, and kind of show you a real good comparison. I've done a ton of videos on spinning reels before, fished with them in some recent videos, so you've seen me using them, but the podcast format is kind of nice because I can ramble on, and a lot of stuff that I think of at the last minute, I can just kind of add it and interject it in there. So, this is going to be a very visual one. I know most people watch the video podcast on YouTube, but there are also a bunch of people that listen to the audio podcast. So, this is going to be a little more visual, but I'm going to try to narrate it really, really well. I want to thank the folks at Moot Outdoor Clothing. If you've seen any of my videos, I've been wearing some of their outdoor rain gear, trying it out, putting it through the paces. They make a bunch of high end, high quality outdoor gear. So if you're looking for premium quality stuff, not the cheapest out there, but some really well made stuff. A lot of this stuff is engineered for mountaineering, so you know that it's tough. This rain jacket is just a pure Gore-Tex shell. I've been wearing it on a lot of my hikes and a lot of the walking that I've been doing, and it works really good. It's a good wind shell, which I say you need that anytime you're out fishing in the winter. It is a basic wind shell, so you're going to see it in some videos. But check them out. I'll put a link down in the description where you can check them out and see what they offer. The one thing about spinning reels, I'll tell you right off the bat, is they're a lot easier to use. You see a lot of the stuff that I film in the catfish world and the saltwater world. We're using conventional reels, round reels, level winds, whatever you want to call them. The one that looks like the old school Jaws fishing reel. And they're great. They're a great reel. They have a lot of good points to them, but the one thing that draws them back, especially with the ones that cast like we use, the bait casters, the casting reels, is that, well, they can be intimidating to use. They can be hard to cast. You can get backlashes. You get all kinds of problems with them. People don't like them. And that's where spinning reels have been a perennial favorite for anglers for a long, long time. Here's one from Catfish Pro. This is called a 600 STS. They make a couple different ones. This is one that is in a size class that a lot of catfish people would be looking for. People that are saltwater fishing. Now, you're going to ask yourself, what are these sizes and what do they mean? I'm going to go over that. It's kind of interesting and it's kind of complicated, and you'll find out it's not all that even. One of the first ones I got back for some saltwater fishing was this Penn Battle 2. This is a big, big saltwater fishing reel here. This is something designed for some pretty big game. It's, like I said, made by Penn. They make really good stuff. It's not the cheapest. It's not the most expensive. Just for you guys that don't know, there are some spinning reels, the Stellas. I believe they're made by Shimano. That are $7, $8, $900. These things get very, very expensive. They're not always a cheap alternative, but generally speaking, they're more affordable. This one is a mid-range reel. It's a very well-built reel. This has been used in nothing but saltwater since I owned it. I've never used it in freshwater for any kind of fishing. Carries a lot of braid. It's got a high-capacity spool on it. It's got a lot of drag. I don't remember exactly how much this one has, but I think it's in the 30-pound range, 28, somewhere in there. It's a lot of drag. It's a lot more drag than you're probably going to be putting on fish. Now, this is their big one. This is the 8,000. I think this is about the biggest spinning reel they make. Comparably speaking, is one that is probably what I would consider on the low end of the catfish world a 4,000 series. You see this one, you can see the size difference in these two reels, considerably different. Built basically the same build design, just on a smaller scale, and pretty much anywhere across this pin series of reels, you will get a step down in size. And with that, the frame becomes smaller. Usually the drag becomes less. The spool size, the capacity of the spool becomes smaller. And it's kind of consistent across a particular brand. Now, this uses a 1,000 system. So 8,000 would be your biggest. And if you went all the way down to a 1,000, which is probably a little bitty small spinning reel, it would be your smallest. So it kind of gives you an idea of this numbering system. Now, to add confusion to the matter, some companies, like Catfish Pro, use a 100 number system. This is a 600. It would basically be comparable in size to a 6,000. Now, there is no direct correlation between anything on any of the different brands and the different numbers that go together. So that can make it a little bit more confusion. But if I pull these back in here and you look at them, now these are two different brands, mind you, but you can kind of see that these could almost be from the same brand, because this one here is kind of in the middle. If this is a 8 and this is a 4, this would be a 6,600. It's kind of in the middle. There could be a 7,000 here. There could be a 5,000 here. Some brands skip the individual. It's like 2, 4, 6, 8. Sometimes there's 10. So it kind of gives you an idea of the correlation between those numbers and what that means. Now, let's confuse things even further. I'm going to pull in a couple of reels here that are from China. These are some of the Temu reels that I got a little while back. Did some videos on them. And if I've got my numbers right, this one is a Sugalang 2000. Okay. This one is a Sugalang 1000. Now, as you look at those two reels, if you're like me, I can hardly tell any difference in between the two. Basically the size from the reel seat to the center line of the chassis looks about the same. Spool size, pretty dang close. Even the build of these things is pretty similar. I'm trying to see if there's a difference in the actual handle. Not really. So my point there is it can get confusing on that size. When it comes to the catfish world, I'll eliminate some of the confusion. Stuff in this size, unless you're just fishing for channel catfish and smaller fish like in a local pond, I would stay away from like the 2,000 class stuff. Generally speaking, I like to start geared up with something like this that is in the 4,000 series. I think it gives you enough line capacity for most fish out there. It gives you more than enough drag for fish out there, and it's a it's a good size reel. It also gives you a lot of options for using it for other stuff. Like I said, I use this thing saltwater fishing for catching smaller redfish, black drum, trout, that kind of thing. Up in some of the creeks. So it's great size for that. It's not super heavy, if you've got this thing in your hand all day, compared to this, the big brother, that is an absolutely huge reel. You're not wanting to hold this all day. So it's a big difference there. And I say start in about the 4,000 class. Ideal world, money's no object. You can get what you want. Something like this Catfish Pro reel is a 600, 6,000 class, whatever brand you go with. That seems to be a good all-around reel that gives you plenty of line capacity to catch catfish. It gives you extra line capacity should you have a break off out on a trip. You're not having to re-spool the entire spool. Gives you more drag than you're ever going to need. I think even this Catfish Pro reel is in the mid 20 pound range. I run 20 pound Andy line on this thing. So I'm not maximizing the drag on this reel to that much. I run my drag around 8 pounds, maybe 10, somewhere in there. So that's my suggestion. Somewhere in that 4 to 6 range is going to be plenty. Now, should you ever get a reel this big for catfish? Well, there's no logical reason to do it. As long as I've had this reel, probably a decade now, I've never taken it fishing for catfish. I've just used it in the saltwater where I needed the massive amount of line capacity for very large fish. Some of the sharks that we get into, mid-sized sharks. It's good to have this until you get the anchor up on the boat and go after them. So my take is to go with this Catfish Pro size reel, this 600, 6,000 kind of class. That's going to work for you. Um, One thing about this one I'll tell you is that, let me pull in one of these. A little smaller, doesn't take up much. They look basically the same. I mean, everything on them is pretty much the same. The build quality or the build shape and everything on these things is all pretty much the same until you get to this back end right here. If you'll notice, the back end on the Catfish Pro reel, it's got something different back here. It's got a knob, it's got a lever. This pin doesn't have it. What that is a system that allows you to feed line off, so that depending on what you're fishing for, how you're fishing, what you're doing, you can allow line to go off the reel after the bail is flipped. The bail is this thing here. People use different names for it. You flip this over when you cast it. You hold the line, you throw it. You flip this over, it's ready to reel the line in. So there's no way line can come off of it unless you're pulling against the drag. And the drag is adjusted up here by this little dial on the front. And that is how easily line comes off the reel when it's sitting there and engaged. Now, let's say you're fishing for something fairly big. You've got your drag kind of heavy. Well, line's not going to come off this reel easily. So if you're feeding out line, let's say you want a fish to run with this, like a shark that's going to pick up a bait and chew on it, or you're letting out line when you're trolling and you're letting out planer boards. You can use this line feeder, bait feeder. There's some different names for it. Basically what it does is it frees the spool up to turn while this is engaged and while your drag is already set. You can use the knob back here in the back to turn it, to add tension to it as to how hard it is for the line to come off. Crank it all the way down and it's really hard to pull the line off of there. Now once you start to engage the reel, it flips it over. I'll show you that again. It's there, it's loose. You put one crank on this reel, boom, it flips it over and engages, and no more will that line come off, except unless you allow the drag to let line come off of it. So it's a nice feature that puts it a little more into the class of the bait caster. It gives some features of the bait caster. So if you're looking for something like that, this Catfish Pro and some other models out there have this feature on them, and I'll put you a link down to this reel in the description below. Price-wise on these things, you know, you get into the pin's going to be more expensive. It's, you know, a higher end, higher quality reel. Same thing with the Daiwa or Shimano. They're both known for high quality spinning reels. Something like this is going to be a lot more affordable. I'm not sure what the price point is. That's why I'm going to put you a link in the description where you can check these reels out and see what the current price is. One thing about these videos is when you put them up, you don't know when somebody's watching them. So if I tell you this thing's, you know, $49, well, you watch it 10 years from now, maybe $69. You're saying, Dieter, you're lying to me. What's going on? So that's something to keep in mind. Now, you get into these Chinese-made reels. These things are dirt cheap, and I'll tell you that right now. I think these things, when I did the little review on these reels a few months ago, I want to say they were 14, 15 bucks. So you can get them dirt cheap. They look really cool. They got some nice handles on them with the ball here. It's just a nice ergonomic design to it. Now, what are you getting? Something you can repair? Who knows? Is it going to last forever? Who knows? I think there's something to be said for the price you pay for fishing gear, especially anything mechanical. But with that said, you could buy and throw away a lot of these before you buy one reel made by Penn or even Daiwa, and especially somebody like Shimano. They make a lot more expensive reels. So that's some information on the spinning reels. They'll catch any catfish out there. I know a lot of people watch this channel for catfish, and they will catch any catfish out there. Don't hesitate to use them. I use the bait casting reels a lot of times out of habit more than anything, and muscle memory, and just being used to how they feel in my hand. Just, you know, just working with them all the time. And with letting line out for trolling, letting line out for any of the drifting with the planer boards, I think it's easier than using this bait feeder mechanism. With that said, don't let that stop you from buying a spinning reel because you feel more comfortable using it. If you feel more comfortable using one of these reels, by all means, get one of these reels. The spinning reel is going to catch any fish you need out there, any fish you encounter, and it's going to be easier to cast. You're going to feel a lot more comfortable casting with it. You can teach a kid to cast one of these pretty quickly, so you don't have that curve to overcome in the fishing journey. So that's kind of my take on them. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. You do need a different fishing rod. There are spinning rods and there are casting rods. The difference is the guides on the rod. Generally, that first guide on a spinning reel is going to be really big, whereas on a casting rod, that's going to be smaller. And a lot of that has to do with the diameter of where this line is coming off. It's a bigger area that has to get pinched down into a smaller area. Are the rods interchangeable? To a certain extent, yes. To maximize casting ability, you're probably better off going with a rod specific. But hey, if you've got a spinning reel, spinning rod, you want to put a bait caster on it, put it on there. It's not optimal for it, but it will work. So that's about the only other thing I can think of. Like I said, I'll put you some links down in the description. I appreciate you throwing these questions out there because this is stuff, I get these questions. A lot of people ask them in private, and that's fine, because you feel like, man, I don't want to post this because I sound stupid. But the truth is, a lot of these questions are questions everybody has. And a lot of this stuff is stuff that I take for granted that people know. And, I've been doing it for so long that I just assume people know it. And, I'm reminded of that every time I take a guide trip and take people out, that there's going to be a question asked. And I think quietly to myself, man, kind of a jerk for not explaining that. And, it's stuff like that, that these kind of videos kind of to the point and, discuss this stuff and talk about it. Like I said, I've got a ton of these videos out talking about spinning reels, but I like to do it in this podcast format, see how it's received, see how you guys like it, and see how it works. So keep the questions coming. DieterMelhornFishing.com is the place where you can drop a comment. You can always drop a comment down in the comment section on YouTube. It's a lot easier there, but the contact section on YouTube is on my webpage is the best place to go, DieterMelhornFishing.com, and you can hit me up there and send me a message and reach out to me and, ask a question, and we'll see if we can get it answered. We'll catch you guys out on the water.